This is why people love the UFC. They don't have to wait on big fights like boxing. You got to wait a couple of years. They get them immediately. The new prospects get thrown into the wolves. Khamzat Chimaev, Gilbert Burns, and the one we're going to be talking about today, Petr Yan versus Sean O'Malley. Sean O'Malley really didn't beat anybody up until that point. The Pedro fight was very unfortunate. Don't get me wrong. I think he would have won that fight, but everybody knew the skill that Sean O'Malley had, even though there are some people underestimating him. So Dana White was like, all right, let's make it happen. But how crazy is that a guy who's ranked number 11 with everything to gain can fight a guy who's ranked number 1 with basically everything to lose and not much to gain in that situation? Because you know, if he wins, great, you beat Sean O'Malley, ranked number 11. And if he loses, well, all right, well, you just lost to the number 11th ranked guy who has colorful hair and all that, and you mocked him a lot. So it was really risky by Petr Yan, but that's the business. Like, they just make the best fights happen. And now Petr Yan, who, I will say this, the management has been terrible. I mean, imagine going on a 3-fight losing streak and being like, let me fight Merab. Like, who does that? That's a terrible idea and just a complete mental lapse. It kind of reminds me of Tai Tuivasa getting knocked out by Gane and then going on like 4 months later or whatever it was and fighting Sergey. Like, some UFC fighters need to calm down on the whole I'll fight anybody, anytime, anywhere. Like, at some point it just becomes straight up stupid, and I think that was the case with Petr Yan fighting Merab. And now look at how people view Petr Yan. The brand is completely ruined, and he's just not viewed the same. Who knows if he'll ever be viewed the same. Now Sean O'Malley still hasn't fought since that fight and is getting Aljamain Sterling like 4 months after, I think it's 4 months after beating Henry Cejudo. So now you're getting a guy who's not as fresh, who has to cut a lot of weight because Aljo's a big guy, and you haven't fought since that fight. So it's crazy to see how one fight with a guy ranked number 11 can change the entire projection of two guys' careers and the whole division just in general, because Sean O'Malley does have a big advantage fighting Aljo 3 or 4 months after Cejudo, when he's probably not going to be his best self. I mean, this is a serious game. Injuries happen all the time. Aljo's already been talking about all the injuries that he's had. So he's probably going to go into the O'Malley fight injured. Sean O'Malley gets this perfect prime position off of one fight, off of beating one very serious contender, and he's up. He's all the way up. And again, that's just part of the reason why we love the UFC. We don't gotta wait to see how good the young hyped up prospects are. They're going straight into the biggest matches with the biggest dogs, and there's high stakes on the line for both parties. Like, the bigger guys can't lose their rankings, and the younger guys don't want to lose, because a loss, despite what a lot of people say, does affect their stock, unless the fight is like a really close barn burner like Gilbert Burns, Khamzat Chimaev, where the loser still gets his stock boosted. But nobody wants a loss on their record no matter what. It's just going to hold them back from what they eventually want to do. Nice thing about the UFC though is a loss really doesn't affect you as much, but still that hype train kind of ends and you got to restart, which isn't the end of the world for a lot of fighters. I mean, look at Macy Barber. She's making the comeback after the hype train kind of just got stalled out, but she's, you know, doing great now. But it does hurt the ability to market yourself with that whole undefeated in the UFC thing, because of course that's always going to help. And some guys, they just never recover from a loss or a moment like Petr Yan's knee to the head of Aljamain Sterling. It hasn't been the same for him since then. So hopefully Petr Yan is able to recover, because he's still a great fighter. He just caught a bad break with close fights and then bad management fighting Merab. He just needs a tune-up fight, and then he's right back into contention. Maybe rematch Corey Sandhagen. There's so many great fights to be made at 135. I would say Cheeto, but he's fighting Henry Cejudo. So we'll see what happens in the future. But that Sean O'Malley versus Aljamain Sterling fight should be really good. Let me know what y'all think about who wins that fight and what Petr Yan should do moving forward with his career. But hopefully y'all enjoyed this video. I'd appreciate it if you would subscribe, and that is it for me on this one. Peace.